Hey guys, it's our third Instagram live. I'm pretty excited. I hope you guys are having a good night. Sorry that the time's a little bit later, but hopefully Matt will be absolutely worth listening to. We'll just let him jump in and then we'll get started with him. But if you want to go over and follow Matt after the session, his handle is Unparalleled Twin. He's from the UK, pretty awesome guy. So make sure you follow him after this as well so you can keep following his journey. Some guys jumping in. Hey, Jackson. I'm stoked to see Jackson in here. Jackson's a guy that I've been chatting with for a while online. He's done some pretty cool stuff. Rode a little TU around, which is pretty awesome. I'm just going to bring in Matt. Stop it, Jackson. Hey, Matt.
Yo.
How you
How are
going?
you?
How you going?
I'm very, very well, mate. My tragic Australian accent.
It was terrible, but full stars for having a crack, and we'll never speak of it again.
No, okay. It's fair play. I accept that.
How are you? It's your midday, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I'm all good, thank you. What about yourself?
I'm good. I've had a good day. Did some chores. We had a bit of a fire pit tonight, so that was quite nice.
Awesome. Awesome.
Um,
I'm missing stuff like that, but
I
with
know.
people, like 100%.
It's all a bit crazy. I had one of my questions as how are you handling COVID, but we might as well jump in since you've sort of brought it up. How are you handling COVID?
Yeah, it's a good question, isn't it? Like, everyone's handling it differently. I guess it's just one of those things where we're all taking it a day at a time. I think for people like us who just love motorcycles, it's just killer because
hmm
I guess, being out riding is what we love doing. Um, and here in the UK, obviously, ever since I think the lockdown was initiated on the 23rd of March, and literally since then, I think we've had literally like one day of rain, and that's unheard of. Like in April, like April showers here in the UK is classic. It's going to be raining through April. Summer doesn't get here till July, but we've
Yeah.
literally had the most amazing weather. So it's just sheer torture here. What about you?
Well, look, I was going to say 100% Murphy's Law, that it just is the way it is. I've been going okay. I've been getting out a little bit on the bike to do sort of some, I guess, essential errands, but I've mentioned a couple of times in these videos, there's not a whole lot I can carry on the bike. So,
Yeah.
there's pretty limited interaction with the bike at the moment. So just making the most of it. We've got so I've got the Street Scrambler. I've also got two other bikes that are in
Awesome.
the shop at the moment. So just getting those serviced. So yeah, just making the most of it and taking it each day as it comes, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think just absorbing your bike outside in the driveway and doing little mods and tinkering is like something that's sort of like, I don't know, it's a little cure for the itch at the moment. So it's the only thing we can do.
That's it. That's it. Um, so the reason why I wanted to have you on the live is because I love your Instagram account, and you sort of started supporting me pretty quickly with Ivory Moto, which was amazing. And I think we share a lot of similar passions for Triumph. So I wanted to start by getting you to sort of talk through the bobber and why you chose that bike, and yeah, just kind of take us on your riding journey, I guess.
Yeah, so, okay. Well, thanks so much, by the way. I appreciate you having me on here as well. I think the whole neutral exchange thing is just an awesome idea, like with what's going on right now. Just people who are like-minded, motor enthusiasts. If you can keep people connected and we can communicate on the other side of the world, this is an awesome little platform. And I think, even after lockdown's done, I think this is something you guys should totally keep doing. Um, in regards
Yeah, oh,
to
for sure, for sure.
in regards to the bobber, Yeah, that is interesting, really. I mean, I have always been a fan of the custom culture, the sort of cafe racer scene, scramblers, trackers, and bobbers and things like that. And I think it was just something that was kind of a bit different and a bit gnarly for me. It was kind of out of, should we say, a little bit out of my comfort zone. Like, I've always loved Harley Davidsons and things like that. But I've also loved Triumph, and Triumph as a brand, I think with the bobber, like, it was quite a Marmite bike. Like, some people hated it, some people liked it. And I quite liked the fact that some people disliked it. I don't know why. It kind of made it quite cool to own.
Yeah.
And it had characteristics of like a Harley Sportster, and for me that was like a really nice thing to have. But it was with the Triumph tag, and you've got that beautiful Bonneville engine as well. So I was able to, I think really the bobber was the first bike I've ever owned where I've done quite a lot of work to it. I say I've done it, I didn't actually do it myself. But in regards to modifications to it, definitely. I think ideally my whole interest lies in like scramblers and trackers and that. So I think when it came to the decision to part ways with a bobber, I don't know if do you know a chap called Henry Crew?
Yes, yeah, I've got some questions about him a little further down as well.
Yeah, awesome. So basically, I participated in the ride to meet him as he made his way back into the UK, and I did like over 500 miles on that bobber, on that little tiny saddle, and and it was literally that whole experience that made me realise that what I want from riding is something that can do a bit of everything. I wanted something that I could travel on, something that still had that badass sort of aggressive attitude of the bobber. And I think really that was the sort of ultimatum that made me realise I'm not going to be able to really travel and do the things I'd love to do on this. And it's really the key thing that made me realise, I'm going to have to part ways with it and accept a compromise. But truthfully, with the Scrambler, there is no compromise. There is no compromise.
We'll get to that. You're chewing through my questions, so I'm going to slow you down a bit. Scott's one of the guys that's on the live at the moment. I ride with him quite regularly, and he said go the Sportster. He's a big Harley fan, so you've got some fans on the live, so you're in good company with Harleys.
Awesome.
So with the bobber, one thing that I really wanted to get into, the fact that you've done a lot of mods to it, and I think one of the things I've sort of thought about with my street scrambler is obviously starting to modify it, but you went pretty hard on the bobber. How did you start to make that decision? Where did you start looking? Especially if there's people on the live who are looking to modify their bike, it can be a bit of a daunting process, I guess, to start to find custom parts. How did you go about it, Matt?
Yeah, 100%. No, it's a really good question. I think we all start somewhere, regards to our motorcycle journey, and whether that be like your skill set. If you're not exactly like mechanically minded and you don't know how to tweak a bike, the first thing you're going to jump on board to look at is like bolt-on parts, bits that are pre-made by companies that you can just throw on. And that ideally was the first place I started looking. And the company called Moto Customs, you might be familiar with them. Other people might also. They're an awesome company have made.
I just ordered a bag rack from them. We were talking about
awesome.
With Tony, from the Insta Man Cave.
Again,
on the last call.
Yeah, I was going to say, Tony, like a lot of his stuff he's rated Moto, so like with his reviews as well. I've watched Tony for some time as well, and so jumping on board with Moto was a good shout because they make parts that sort of work across the board with like the liquid cooled Triumphs, so like the Street Scram, the Street Twin, the Bobber, and I was able to just make little aesthetic changes to start with, like little clutch badges, ACG covers and stuff like that. And one of the unique things for me from then was like bar risers. So they did bar risers so I can adjust the height. And they also looked awesome. Like they just had an aesthetic that really suited me. Again, as I say, these are just bolt-on parts, so they're super easy to do. You can do it in your own time, do it in the garage. You don't need to pay for somebody to, the labour, etc., to get somebody to fit it. It's just a fun way to just get to know your bike as well, whether that just be taking the handlebars off and just knowing, like, how it all goes back together. I think obviously the biggest change for me was the rear end. So obviously a lot of bikes, when I look at them, I'll always look at the rear end and just have a look at, because I don't know whether it's a UK regulation thing or just a classic thing that motorcycle manufacturers do, but like the rear ends are always quite bulky.
Oh yeah.
I don't know whether it's a little thing to give you a bit of motivation to look in their catalogue to see parts that you could fit, but I instantly, I disliked it so much, like the rear end of the bobber. It ruined the classic lines of the bike and everything. I think a lot of people would agree on that one. So I looked online again, because I asked around to see if anybody could chop it. I really thought of chopping the fender myself. I was really considering getting an angle grinder out and just diving in, but with the cost of the bike and stuff, I was just like, I don't know whether I can be that hardcore just yet. So guys in Germany called Wunderkind Customs, they make the whole rear kit, and they had, like, their setup was just one of the nicest setups I've ever seen for it, because the lights and the rear unit was all set into brackets that were just coming off the rear fender, and I just thought
Yeah,
it
I
was
was going
so.
to ask you about the lights, and I was having a little bit of a look at the whole setup, and I honestly thought that you must have completely worked that all yourself, because it looked so custom but well put together.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the idea of just reducing bulk was one of the first things that I just wanted to do. But at the same time, the idea of not having to have a rear tail light as a whole was just nice. Being able to have it multifunctional, so they were just built into the little lights, and like everywhere I went on that thing, that was what everybody was asking me about. Every time wherever I pulled up, people would just ask about, oh my god, that rear end, like it's just amazing, like the lights are just so slick, and it was just such a lovely feeling, and it just tidied it up so well, and it was so neat, and like, it hugged the rear wheel, and it was just like, to me, it was how a bobber should look. It was a completely bobbed end, and you know, Wunderkind make a fantastic part with that, and I think they do other parts for like the bobber as well. One thing I have noticed is sort of like European manufacturers, they tend to make really cool, wacky stuff that like some of the UK scene don't really touch upon. Like I found that with like I don't know, SW Motec, Free Spirits in Italy. These guys, Wunderkind, they always make some parts that are just a bit different to the normal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. Sometimes I get on those sites and you've got to translate them, but once you do that, you kind of find a whole treasure trove of like custom parts that you just can't bolt as well. It's crazy.
Yeah, it can prove deadly looking at them on
Tony
the way.
saying, yeah, Tony saying the bubble was gorgeous. It really was.
Cheers,
You,
Tony. Much love,
how,
man. Yeah.
how long did you have the bobber format?
I had it for, I think it was just over a year. Yeah, just over a year. It's funny because, again, like the little child that I am, obviously, you know, we've all got responsibilities and stuff. But there was a moment where I literally owned both bikes. So I had my Triumph Scrambler, the 1200, and the Bobber, and they were both in the garage at the same time. And there was just something that felt so phenomenal for me at the time, just having them both there. It was incredible, but I knew obviously one of them had to go, and I should have been sensible really and got rid of the bobber first before I jumped the gun on this. But a really good opportunity came up for the Scrambler, so I sort of had to jump on it. But I really, if I could financially afford it and whatnot, I 100% would have kept the bobber, because it was
Yeah,
a
yeah.
beautiful bike.
Yeah, I totally I get that. I came off a little TU and jumped on the street scrambler, and still got the TU at the moment, but it's promised to a couple of friends. And yeah, I mean, as much as I'd love to keep it and have a full garage, you kind of need to do the right thing by the bank account as well,
Yeah.
I think.
Goddamn responsibilities, it's not fair.
Um, So I had a look. You spent about £2,000 on modifications to the bobber. Would you spend a similar amount on the 1200? Do you think, or how are you feeling about modding that?
I'm assuming you mean the Scrambler, yeah, at the moment?
Yeah, yep, yep.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, right now, I'm a dad now, actually. So being a dad means that responsibilities are genuinely there now. So I would love to. I would obviously I'd rather spend that money towards things that are more important. However, if I could, I 100% would. I think there are so many little things on the bike that I just constantly, especially this lockdown right now, it's so easy to just look, overlook things, and you see things
Yeah.
that weren't annoying before, but they're now really annoying and they're really irritating, and you just want to change it. So I really, yeah, I guess I'd kind of love to jump the gun and make a big change, like get a custom paint job on the tank. That's something I would love to do.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
noticed on one of your posts on your Ash Ivory Instagram, I noticed you were talking about the two-tone on your Street Scrambler and how at first you weren't too keen, and that is exactly how I felt about this. But now I've got it, I kind of like it.
Yeah,
I love it.
I felt the same, and someone commented on one of my posts the other day. You know, I love the custom tank on the Street Scrambler, and I obviously replied and said it's stock. So yeah, I think they've done a really nice job with, especially with the 1200s. They're just a beautiful tank.
Yeah.
Jackson saying, so Jackson, I'm not sure if you know of him, Jackson Photo. So he's done a little bit of a ride around the States on his little TU, and he's recently upgraded to a speed twin. He said, I miss the little TU every once in a while, the little 250. I do too. I get it. Like every now and then you kind of just want something small to throw around, and you kind of forget
Yeah,
what that's feeling like. Scott said one ass, two horses. That's a really fair response.
yeah, I saw
You and Ben, another one of my mates, has said, wish we all could keep every bike, and I totally agree. It's tough. It's tough. So you're thinking not as much modifications to the 1200 then, although you blacked
that.
out a few parts on it, right?
Yeah, so I think one of the key things, like when you go and buy any bike, obviously, it's all about appearance to begin with. Like no matter what people say, like it will always be about what it looks like. That's the first thing, because obviously there's no physical contact. You're standing back and you see a bike, you see a picture of it, you know whether it takes your fancy. So the aluminium parts on the Scrambler 1200 are something I just really wanted to balance out the colours, and I do like a Scrambler looking quite dark, menacing and aggressive, and blacking out those parts was one of the key things I really wanted to do. And I'd like to do the same to the bash plate, so the little belly pan as well. I'd really love to
Yeah,
black that out.
I totally agree. That headlight mount just grinds on me at the moment, looking at that now, especially like you're saying, in isolation, and just kind of having it sit there, and you're not really riding it. It's just grinding on me. So I think there's a couple of parts that I'd really like to get blacked out as well.
Yeah, definitely. I know on I think, do we both have aluminium headlight brackets, don't we?
Yeah,
Do we?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so like a little thing like that as well. It's just like, oh, I really wanna get them off, and paint them black. Like the headlight bezel, some kind of things, well, like the complete opposite of each model. So like you got a black headlight bezel on the XE, but it was aluminium on the XC. But then on the XC on the XE it was aluminium, and in one way or another you couldn't quite win and get a bit of everything. But I think blacking stuff out is such a nice, cheap, and good way of really changing the aesthetic.
Tony's saying get the rattle cans out. I'm not that brave. I don't
No,
think I could do it. No way. See,
no.
Matt's with me. Tony, you're insane. Only you could do it. Um, you touched on the Henry Crew ride. You were on the bobber for that. So tell me a bit about the ride, how you got involved, and then we might talk a little bit about why you went from the bobber to the scrambler as well.
Yeah, sure. So obviously Henry Crew, he's actually a young lad who I've followed for quite some time. To be fair, he always had this sort of cool character about him that I actually just came across him literally through Instagram, just the classic, you're scrolling one day and you see a cool picture that pops up. So you end up looking at their profile and you see some cool photos. And basically I then suddenly found out that this guy, you know, he's literally aiming to break literally the world record to be the youngest motorcyclist to literally travel around the world. And that for me was really badass. And I grew up, something that actually motivated me into riding was the classic Long Way Round and Long Way Down by Ewan McGregor and Charlie Boorman. And Charlie Boorman, of having, you know, being part of the bike shed, which is where it all kicked off from, and suddenly just seeing like a video pop up of Charlie Boorman wishing Henry the best of luck on YouTube, I was like, whoa, this is, you know, this is real, this is crazy.
Yeah.
And the next thing that just blew my mind was the fact that he was doing it on a desert sled. I was like, no way. Like, I just thought of like, you know, people traveling the world, it's going to be, you know, I'll do a little bit of stereotyping here, but you feel like people will do it on adventure bikes, you know, big Triumph Tigers or BMW GSs, outright.
I like to call them dentist bikes.
Yeah, and I think just the little inner child in him was like, you know, I love this style of bike. This is me. Why the hell not? Like, at the end of the day, anything is possible unless you put your mind to it. And, you know, he literally proved that traveling those, I think it was 55,000 miles, that he could do it, and he'd done it all on just a Ducati desert sled, so like a scrambler style bike. And I just thought that was amazing. So when I found out about the whole story of him coming into the UK to return, and then it all went out on Insta, advising that, you know, I'm getting the ferry over from Calais and I'm going to be down south, and my plan is to ride all up through Kent and everything up to the bike shed for the final return home. And like, I was like, yeah, I don't care whether my bobber is going to destroy my arse cheeks. I was like, I've got to get involved. I've got to get involved in this. And obviously, my friends who I've made through this Instagram platform, you know, I got to meet people. I met Moto Bob for the first time. So Rob's a totally cool guy. I'd even been on his channel once. He got me involved because, again, you just meet people through all of this, and it's just amazing. And you realise how minded you all are, and how we're all just normal people. It's easy to get caught up in the, should we say, the, you know, that idolization of looking at somebody online and you think they're a celebrity because of, you know, how good their career is or whatever. But really, we're all just like people that just love bikes, and that's the bottom line.
No, I totally agree. I think I followed Henry as well. He actually rode. I wasn't following him when he came through, actually, which was a bit of a shame, but he went through a place called Ella Speed, one of our kind of custom shops in Brisbane. So really cool. And I think they gave him a few stickers and sent him on his way. And I was really, really upset to see that his bike got nicked at the end of all of it. It's just,
I know.
such a shame.
Being someone in the UK, it's just such rubbish news, but it's almost, I know it happens everywhere in the world, but just knowing that he traveled the whole world on that thing, and as soon as he returns to the UK, someone pinches it. I just felt quite a lot of anger for him, because I lost a bike when I was younger. I was diagnosed with epilepsy, like when I was younger, and I had to surrender my license for 2 years, and I didn't have my bike for 2 years, and it was that was killing me. And I finally got it back on the road, and within like 3 weeks somebody pinched it, and it's just such a killer thing. If anyone out there has experiences bike theft, it is just horrible, because you rarely get it back.
Heart-wrenching. Hey, I'm really sorry about the epilepsy, mate. Like, how do you know, is it something that you manage now when you ride, or does it affect you in the same way?
Yeah, it's truthfully, it's really sort of died out. I had it all controlled with medication at the time, and it was just a case of, if I could be seizure free for 2 years, I could get my license back, and basically that's what happened, and I've just been safe ever since. So it's just a question of, I think that as well really motivated me to get out and ride more, because you just think to yourself, all it takes is that simple little flick of a switch, and you know, I have one little seizure and that's it. Like, I can't ride, and that's for 2 years of my life. It's just gone. I can't do it. So I was like, I've got to get out here, and I've got to enjoy life and do things that, you know, maybe that was a pivotal point rather in my life to get out there and ride.
And with, I guess that potentially explains a little bit about the energy that you put into your Instagram account as well, because, you know, a lot of us just do it because we love it, and it's something, you know, something that we're passionate about, and you might as well be, you know, I guess, putting your energy into that. Is that a big part of sort of why, you know, you started the account and why you kind of document so much of your riding?
Yeah, definitely. I think it all boiled down really to so a guy called TC and Thundercat. I think you'll know who Tim is.
Yeah.
Really cool guy. Absolutely love him. It feels like a brother to me, and I've only 2 years. It's super awesome, and it's all sort of friendships all blossomed from Instagram and motorcycles. But he basically, obviously, he's a photographer and he's got his own personal profile, etc. And basically he recommended that, why don't you set up your own Instagram? And because I was basically flooding my personal profile with bike stuff, and I think
Yeah.
friends and family that aren't interested are just like, oh god, here we go, here's Matt uploading another bike pic. And I just thought, what, it's such a good idea to do that. And it all just spiraled from there and became this just awesome thing where I've just been able to reach out to amazing people, like what we're doing now. Do you know what I mean? It's awesome.
It is. It's lovely. I'm really keen to, when I get over to the UK next, we'll have to have a beer or a coffee, depending on what time we meet. But yeah, I'm so lucky to, you just meet so many amazing people that are just so willing to support you and give you advice and even just banter. That, I think that's the best part.
Yeah.
And it's crazy
Yeah.
how a platform like Instagram can kind of make the world feel so small. Scott said the bike shed's amazing. I love the bike shed. I think I've mentioned on one of your posts that, the bike shed feels like a second home to me. And obviously, being there with Henry when he arrived would have been pretty amazing as well. Do you spend much time there? Like, where are you based?
So I live in Peterborough. It's actually about a 2 hours ride. So I ride south down to London for me going to the bike shed.
Yeah.
So I'm not overly far away at all. The commuting links where I am. I'm in a little village just on the outskirts. I can commute into some great places. So it's really cool for me.
And you mentioned Boyd's of Bedford, so they're mates of yours, yeah, and they've set up this amazing shop. Do you want to sort of tell us a bit about that as well?
Yeah, definitely. So like, I was gonna talk about them at some point anyway, because I think for me, like the bike shed in general, in terms of the scene, the bike shed scene, and the custom culture, the cafe racer scene. I think it's lovely, but it's so scarce, sort of here in the UK. You have to travel
Yeah.
quite far to go to places to get that full vibe. And like for me, Boyd's a bit like when I got to know them, they just had little meetups in the little town of Bedford, and it was just a case of people meeting up in the sort of the center of the town. And suddenly, we realized that there's some cool people coming along here, and I ended up going along just to check out their shop. And it's this super cute little tiny shop down this little high street, and it's you could clearly see when you walked in there that there was so much potential in terms of what they wanted, their whole vision, and you could just see that it was all restricted in this little room. And
Mm-hmm.
I knew that they had plans. So like Tom and Jess, they are the couple that run it, and I got to know them more and more. And when they finally sort of revealed that we're planning on getting an old sort of like a barn out in sort of a rural area on the outside of Bedford, I was like, oh, this is like an old big old shed into something where you can truly let your imagination run wild and do what you really want to do. And for me, the commute to the bike shed was always a bit of a pain in the arse. I'm not a fan of urban riding as such. I grew up in Norfolk. I was surrounded by the countryside. I had fields and woodland around me for my whole childhood, and it was amazing. And for me, Boyd's of Bedford is one, it's even closer than than the bike shed, and two, it's just actually a nice commute. It's just a lovely place. When you go down the little driveway and the track to get to Boyd's of Bedford, it's next to a farm, and it's just lovely. It's sort of what you want. So I just cannot simply wait to get back there, because I've always wanted to have a hangout spot like that that's so close to home.
Yeah, we I know what you mean. When I went to the bike shed, I was blown away and kind of wanted to come straight back to Australia and open one up ASAP. But obviously there's, that fit out was hugely expensive, and you can see why. It's just a phenomenal place, and probably a little bit of a challenge to repeat in LA. I think they're setting the second one up as well. But yeah, it was amazing. And we've got in Brisbane, we've got a couple of places that are quite custom orientated, I guess, but nothing like the bike shed. So I can imagine how exciting Boyd's of Bedford was for you, like just your own little slice of custom motorbike culture.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I mean, truthfully, if I don't know whether it will be a part of the question that you have aimed for me later, but it's actually quite cool that I'm being able to talk to you in Australia, because my big light bulb moment for me actually happened in Australia. So back now, maybe 6 or 7 years, I went to I went to Australia with my partner at the time, and we were in
Yeah,
Sydney, and
yeah,
I knew that Deus Ex Machina and whatnot, I believe they originated there. Their Camper Down shop and whatnot is there,
yeah, that's right. Yep.
and I was like, oh, dude, like I'm here. I have to go here. So I literally went there, and it was just phenomenal. I went there and I saw the culture firsthand. You know, the street was just laden with custom bikes. You know, you had Guzzies, old Bonnevilles, Harleys, Scramblers, and it was beautiful seeing it in the flesh. Because here in the UK, we have classic sort of pub meets. We'll meet up at a pub or a
Yeah.
location. You know, you get bikes all over, like a whole array of different bikes. But there, it was like the whole vibe that I love, that scene, and
Hmm.
the whole shop inside was awesome. And it was funny because obviously we went to like New South Wales, we went to the Blue Mountains, we went to the Three Sisters and whatnot. We
Yeah.
saw some
Oh,
monuments and
wow.
everything. And when we came home, obviously my missus at the time was talking about how wonderful these landscapes were. And don't get me wrong, they were awesome. But I just kept talking about Deus. I was like just talking about how cool this place was. I just couldn't help but have that on my mind, and that constantly was, you know, something where I thought I'd love to be able to come home from work one day and just be able to shoot off somewhere like this, just to have a brew,
Yeah.
just to eat food, chat with friends. And when obviously I knew about the bike shed, you know, again, great, but Boyd's of Bedford is what just hit the nail on the head. It's just perfect.
I love it. It's so good, Matt. I'm so glad you've got that. And I'm the same. Like I'm fortunate enough. I travel for work a little bit, and I was in the States recently, and I think you're truly obsessed with bikes when the first thing you do is check for any custom bike shops, where you're going. And so I was lucky enough to go to the Deus Emporium in Venice there. It was nice and close, and yeah, I spent a couple of hours just sort of working on my laptop and just watching custom bikes sort of roll in and out, and talk to a few people there. And I think it's the other thing I love about the bike community. Especially when I went to the bike shed as well, I kind of walked in on my own. I was again there for work, and I needed a place to kind of conduct some interviews, and just started chatting to the guys in in kind of the restaurant area, and then moved into the apparel area and got to know one of the guys, Ben, behind the counter, really
Yeah,
well. And I just loved it.
just
And
awesome.
I just love, meeting people, and they are so warm when they know you ride. And I mean, yeah, it's great if they love custom bikes and if they kind of get, I guess the affinity, that affinity to doing bikes up and going through that process. But even if
Yeah,
they just ride, you tend to click straight away. So
definitely.
yeah.
Definitely. Another little thing about the shed and about what you say about meeting people. So a while back when I was doing some training in London for work, I was literally in my shirt and my normal trousers, smart shoes and whatnot, and I was literally 5 minutes around the corner from the bike shed. So I went to the shed just to see what it
Hmm.
was like. And Charlie Borman's T120, that's customized by Down and Out Cafe Races, was there,
Yeah.
and I was just walking around it, this lovely burnt orange T120. I was looking at it in the flesh, like, oh my God, I can't believe this is it. And this chap came out, obviously, from the bike shed to ask if I wanted any help or whatnot. And I think he was wondering whether I was being super dodgy walking around Charlie's bike. And basically, fast forward to now, and literally that guy is called Tom Kettlety, he works in the bike shed. And I'm literally friends with him. We've
Hmm.
been out riding, and it's just so weird, just throwing back to then. I had no idea who he was really, and then suddenly down the line, you end up, you becoming friends.
It's crazy, and like we were saying before, the world's just such a small place. Like I love it, and I love that bikes bring us together like this. Um, so with the bobber, you went to the scrambler. Why?
Say that again. Sorry, the connection just chipped out a little.
So you were on the bobber for a while, and then you decided to ditch it and go to the scrambler. Why? What made the decision? You know, I think you had a Himalayan for a little bit as well.
Sorry, the connection's really choppy. I don't know whether it's my end.
Oh, it might be both of us, Matt.
Yeah,
It's
I do
been a bit
apologise.
dodgy tonight, but it's all good. We'll get through it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
heard you say about the Himalayan.
Yeah. So you had the
Yeah,
Himalayan, and did that kind of push you towards the scrambler as well?
yeah. So I think at the time, I think having the bobber and the Himalayan, that was a time in my life where I had two bikes, and it was actually fantastic because a bit like you say about the little bike that you had before. Obviously, it's a lighter bike, it's smaller, it's cool to jump on something like that just for razzing about town or whatever, and that's exactly how it was for me. But with having the bobber, I had the compromise of I can't if I'm going out down some country lanes and I want to go down a little sort of fire trail or a gravel track, I can't really do it on the bobber, and that for me is just 100%. I say 100%, sort of, it's like 50% of why I ride. I love to go on adventures and travel to places, and the idea of not being able to do that was a bit gutting. So the Himalayan was a super affordable, really cool little option, and it gave me the ability to have a real taster of just riding around sort of my local area and traveling on it a little, and sort of like practice wild camping with it, because it was like a mini adventure bike, really. um,
Mm.
I just enjoyed it so much that, to the point where, even though it's not all about the power, but I just felt like if the bike was just a little bit more powerful, like their
Yep.
650 parallel twins, if it had that engine in
Oh,
it, I think it
totally.
would have been
Yep. Yep.
literally like, would be perfect. But I think, yeah, again, like you say, I think that was sort of what, when I realised as well that I'm going to have to come down to one bike, I was thinking of what's the sort of bike that can actually do a bit of everything. And from all my research that I did, it really does boil down to the Scrambler for me, 1200.
Yep. Yep. I one thing I noticed about, so I'm on the street scrambler. I think you rode the street scrambler as well. I'm a pretty average height as a woman, and there's not a whole lot of me. So I was really keen to consider the 1200, but it was just it's a big bike. So
Yeah.
yeah, like it's huge. I'm hopefully working up to having a ride on it, because it's stunning, but man, they're tall, those bikes.
Yeah, they are insanely tall. I remember when I went to my local dealership for the Scrambler reveal, and it was the XE that was underneath the sheet. And
Yeah.
yeah, when it got unveiled, I was like, "Whoa, this thing is insanely high." I think everybody that whole night was just trying to hop on it, and there were so many people that just couldn't really get on it, and it was kind of mind blowing how insane it was. Do you know what I mean? And I think that for me also, though, it just said a little bit about Triumph and how much they obviously listened to like consumers, because like I'd probably say every scrambler they've made has never really been full on designed for hitting the dirt.
Yeah.
Ground clearance, the suspension and everything, it's never really been designed for it, hence why it's called the street scrambler. And I just think it was cool that they finally made something that was really capable. It's not me bashing older scramblers by any means. Like I think I actually kind of prefer the aesthetic of like the street scramblers. I
Hmm.
much
Hmm.
prefer the old school forks with like rubber gaiters. So the upside down forks, I just think that they're cool and they're big and chunky, but I just miss those sort of rubber gaiters, that look. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit going back to what I said about when you're in lockdown and you're looking at so many different bits on your bike, you realise what little things are standing out.
It's tricky. I totally get it. I compromised for quite some time with the TU because of the look. Like it wasn't powerful at all. And in Australia, you've got a limited license for about 2 years. So I couldn't really get on a Triumph for 2 years. And I could have ridden a bigger bike, a more powerful bike, but I wanted the look of the TU. So I stuck on that. But I think it also taught me, a lot of roadcraft as well with a lighter bike. And I think I wasn't so intimidated for, the majority of that learning time. So I learnt to, work on that bike quite well. Will has said, I've tried the XC and I have short legs. You learn quickly to shift a butt cheek. Yeah, all right. Maybe I need to have a crack on the bigger bike.
Yeah, all I can say is though, definitely give it a go. Just see how you get on. I think really any bike that's all once you're riding, you'll never feel it. It's only when you put your foot down at like traffic lights and whatnot, especially for off-road riding. I think you want that sort of confidence, inspiring ability to just have your foot tiptoeing on the floor a little. But yeah, I think you should totally do it, dude. Do it.
Yeah, I will. I will. I've taken the FTR 1200 for a ride and really loved that. And I'm not intimidated by the power of the bike, just purely the height on the scrambler. So yeah, I think maybe I just need to get over that. Someone said, could you set a pair of rubber on the inverted fork? Is there not enough space? Okay, I think they're talking about the gaiters that you like, Matt.
Yeah, so it's quite funny. I actually, it got to the point where I don't know if you saw a post recently where I completely removed sort of like the front guards and everything, so they were completely bare. And I do actually quite like the look, but obviously I don't want them to be exposed. I'd like to cover them so they don't get dings from debris and whatnot. But I did think about buying gaiters just to see what they look like upside down there. But I was looking online on Google at so many bikes. I've never seen a single bike with upside down forks that has the old school gaiters. But I have actually just thought about it. I thought, why not just try it? Let's just see what it looks like. I know TC and Thundercat told me, why don't you just mount them actually like physically around the top of the forks? Like,
I was just thinking that. Yeah. You could just purely put them on, and I guess you could potentially get a custom set maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, for what they are in terms of how they perform, though, the suspension's amazing. So.
I'm just sort of flicking through my other questions as well that I had for you, Matt. We kind of covered the custom parts because I think you've got a wealth of knowledge with that. You touched on one of the European distributors. Is there anywhere else that you you go to find custom parts, or that you sort of look for inspiration as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, really. I mean, there's not there's not a great deal of stuff out there in terms of like you compare, should we say, Triumph and whatnot to like Harley Davidson's. Like when you go to a Harley dealer, they'll show you a Bible of like aftermarket parts that's just massive and it's insane. Whereas there are smaller businesses that do tend to sort of try and cater for people like us that just want to bolt on parts. I know British Customs, I think they're based in the States, I believe. They do similar sort of things. There are another brands that I thought of sort of going towards at one point. I know they do some cool parts for the Liquid Cool range. I think the guys at Moto are so cool. Like I was talking to them when I sort of got the Scrambler, and I was asking whether they had any ideas for making parts. And I guess it's a case for them actually having a Scrambler to sort of work on and get dimensions and whatnot of areas so they can make the parts. I did a while back. I did sort of volunteer and say, dude, if you ever need anything, like I could remove parts and to you. I think they would love to do that, but I think it's a case of because I think Moto are based in Yorkshire here in the UK, and being quite a small business as such in terms of the capacity of the people that run it, they're just trying to do a bit of everything. So maybe one day it'll happen, but I would say for me, Moto and Customs are definitely the sort of go-to. Moto Gadgets as well in terms of electronics. I think they make some wicked like tachometers and speedos, indicator kits and stuff like that, and light units. I think they're the go-to guys for like the electrical stuff.
It's interesting, Tony. So on the last episode, Tony was talking about Moto as well, and just the quality that's coming out of there. So I'm actually quite interested to kind of get to know those guys. And he mentioned a similar thing as well about the fact that they obviously have a lot of quality control that they do because they want the bike and they want to understand, how the parts are going to fit. So, it's a bit limited. You're right. I often see random kind of scrambler builds and the Harley parts that have been used as well, but sometimes you can make it work.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think like a really good
Um,
build. If anybody out there is like sort of listening now and they want to get an idea of Moto, there's a guy called Nixter. I think he's based in Texas, and he has literally one of the most beautiful T120 builds I've ever seen, and he's got a lot of Moto parts on it. So I would 100% check out Nixter. He's got a really cool feed full of wonderful photos.
yeah, yeah, cool. I'll check it out. I don't think I follow him yet, so I'll have a look. Um, I really wanted to ask. We kind of covered it before about sort of parts and if you fitted a lot of those parts on your own. Like, what's the most complex thing that you've had a crack at, Matt?
I'm trying to think now. The most complex thing. I haven't really touched base on. I mean, complex for me would purely be the engine. So that's what I
Yeah,
would class
yeah,
as complex. Depending on the layout of a bike, I mean, like I'd probably say, that that sounds really lame, but it'd probably be the tail tidy kit that I got from Tech
yeah,
Bike Parts. It was actually a massive pain in the ass. I think that's just because it wasn't exactly like a demanding thing. It was just that the way everything was designed to try and get all the, soldering and crimping the wires myself and getting all the connectors together for the electrics. It was a little bit daunting because obviously you hear horror stories of, suddenly you'll blow like the battery or
yeah,
whatever, or
yeah,
other electrics will fail, and it's just like, oh, you don't know what's going to happen. So it was just go ahead and just dive in and go for it. That probably is like the most hardcore thing I've ever done, really. Part of me feels a little bit guilty that's, I would love to get to a point in life where I really can sort of buy a little project bike and I could work on it in my own time, in my own space, and have the knowledge to be able to, take apart carburetors, clean them out, and whatnot. But sadly, I'm not at that stage yet, but baby steps, baby steps.
yeah. That's it. I was actually, so Dan, my mechanic who came and picked the bikes up today, I was talking to him a little bit about that, and I feel like, especially when you own a quite new Triumph, one of the last things you want to do is start, like you're saying, messing around with wires, and you kind of want a little project bike. So yeah, I'm pretty keen to kind of go down that route as well, just so you can have a crack and not worry too much if you stuff it up, I guess.
Yeah, a part of me looking back wishes I kind of kept my Himalayan. I think when Fuel
Yeah,
Motorcycles, they made their own custom Himalayan for the Scram Africa, and I thought it was amazing. Like everything about it was just like, it was just a beautiful aesthetic and design that I fell in love with, and it made me think, oh man, I could have done something like this. And
yeah.
again, they're quite cheap. They're not super expensive. So maybe one day I'd have a Himalayan again. I think they're just a cool little quirky bike that it's just great to have in your collection.
I don't know if you ever saw I think they were the name's escaping me, like the chaperone bikes for the Mallee Mile. They were two Enfields, and I
They were
could not
yeah,
believe it.
two, weren't they? The red and black ones. Yeah,
But yeah, and I was blown away. I mean, Mallee, the design and obviously, the concept behind the bike was beautiful as well. But just the changes that they made to that bike, because I've ridden one of the twins, and I think you've ridden one as well, Matt. And when you look at them, they're good, but they've made it work for the price point. So to see those Mallee
yeah,
bikes, they were stunning. Yeah, yeah, and
yeah.
that's the type of custom build I think I aspire to. I'm not sure if it'd kind of come out like one of those nailed it cakes though.
You never know. You never know.
You got to give it a crack.
Yeah, exactly.
Jackson said Motone's case covers are a thing of beauty. I actually don't know what he's talking about. Like I'm trying to think
Yeah. So the
about
engine case.
what.
So the engine casing. So just picture like the side of our bike. So you've got that triangular section where the alternator is.
Yep,
So
yep.
like they do again, that Nick's the guy that I commented on. He's got the ribbed
Hmm.
case covered. They just look sublime. Like it is one of my favorite builds. I'm forever just going on his feed just to see the new photos that he's putting up because it's just a lovely bike.
The one thing that I really don't like on the Triumphs is the fuel cap. It just It's gross. I don't like it. I think they should really
It's
rethink that.
gross. Whoa, whoa. Just throwing it out there. Disgusting. Vile part created by Triumph.
It makes me
I know what you mean.
sick.
There is always something little that it is vile. It doesn't need to be there. I think for me, mine would be just the rear end on Triumphs. I just
Yeah.
think that they're never subtle enough. They'll just have a massive rear tail section with big old indicators, and so annoying.
I think your conspiracy before was a little bit right though, Matt. I think that's the natural draw card to get you to actually look at the custom catalog, and then before you know it, you've bought, 1,000 parts
Yeah,
out of there, and you've completely overhauled the bike. But yeah, the rear ends are gross. Although I was looking at mine the other day and thinking about, how you could sort of clean it up and trim it down. And the one thing I am a bit concerned about is, I guess, the water off the back tire as well. I put the higher fender on mine, and the one thing I did notice is in a really heavy downpour, there's a little stream of water that can come up and kind of hit the headlight at times with that
yeah.
higher front mud guard. So yeah, I'm not sure how you went on the bobber when you kind of really cut it back.
Yeah, it's funny because obviously, well, when you look at bikes and you see things and you find like builds that are really inspirational, there's parts that you want on your bike, you never actually obviously have a real world sort of like experience of knowing what they're like. And I guess you compromise so much with so many little bits, especially like that. Like the high fender, even on my scrambler, is basically horrendous. Like
Yeah,
you get water and
same.
everything. It drenches from your knee down. Like your legs get absolutely soaked. The
Yeah.
headlight just gets absolutely caked in mud instantly. It doesn't do its job at all, but purely it is just for aesthetics. I accept it as a compromise. With the bobber, yeah, I mean, I basically got drenched. If I was ever caught out in horrible rain, yeah, it would literally just all spray up my back and everything. It was just one of those things that I knew going in, but it's just one of those things I guess you accept because it just looks super cool.
The things you do for custom bikes, huh? Jackson's
Hmm.
saying at least you all aren't cursed with the American blinkers. I don't actually know what he means by that. I'm sure there's some crazy safety standard or road
Yes.
standard.
So I assume he means, I think in the States, their blinkers are just red. So like here in the UK, obviously
Ah,
our daytime running lights are red and our brake lights are red, but the indicators are
yeah,
orange. There
yeah.
was a point where Triumph were actually selling them here in the UK, and you could get them fitted. But I think they realised that, oh Jesus, we're not actually selling legal parts, so they suddenly scrapped it from their catalogue. Because I was thinking about getting those. Because going back to what I said about the bobber, just having multifunctional lights is really cool.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I think actually, speaking of lights, the rear light on my Scram, I would love it if somebody could make a tiny little. If anyone out there is listening, if anybody could make a tiny little plate that like an adapter that would just sit on that little groove on that rear fender, so you could attach like any sort of universal round light to it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's got like the aluminium rear mudguard has basically been pressed, and it's got that shape that's obviously the Triumph only shape. And I think if somebody can make a little part, I spoke to the guys at Moto about that. I said, like, I think this would be a cool little market and area for you to make a little part, because it would be super small. It wouldn't be, you could produce loads of them. It wouldn't be
Yeah,
super
yeah.
people, and it would give people the opportunity to customize the rear end, because I think it's such a modern rear light. I like it, but I love the sort of classic round shapes of stuff. So like a round headlight is just nice. It takes away the sort of modern edge. And I think I'm a big fan of just little changes. I think if you make loads of little changes, it can be a huge game changer for like the way your bike looks.
Yeah, just going back to the US thing that Jackson was saying. So yeah, he's saying basically they're huge. They have to be 14 inches apart from one another. Yeah, so yeah, it kills me here in Australia as well. We've got some weird things we have to abide by, and it kind of just screws the aesthetic from time to time. Jackson's also said check out any of your local off-road light distributors. They should have a fairly standard clamp sizes with light mounting. It's interesting, like I know that if I went down to LSB, they'd definitely be able to cut a custom part like that, Matt, as well. So maybe there's some local bike builders around that you can take a beer around to, and they might just jimmy one up for you.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Tony might know of someone.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's cool idea, Jackson. Cheers for that.
The only other thing I wanted to touch on is a little bit on, I guess, the Instagram front. So with some of your photos are stunning. I love them. Do you do all your own work? You kind of mentioned TC and Thundercat. I'm guessing you guys go riding and sort of shoot each other from time to time.
Yeah, so I think for a good few years of my life, I've always loved photography. It's something that I've always wanted to broaden a bit more and dive deeper into it, but I always just thought I was held back by, finances. I thought you needed really expensive equipment. I thought you needed expensive lenses. I thought you needed like ridiculous skill levels. Do you know what I mean? Everything seems a bit daunting.
Yeah.
But again, I think it just got to the point where you just dive in and you just give something a go, and you just realize how much you enjoy it. And I was, with Instagram, obviously you can't put a post up without a photo. So like every single post is all about the photo, really. It's just a great platform for you to share stuff that you're passionate about, which is obviously is photography. And over the time, I basically was just getting inspired by so many photographers on Facebook with like, they shoot the perfect sort of the vibes and the scene that I love. And for me, I think just as a whole, it was just a real nice thing for my mental health. Like, it was very therapeutic. I love capturing, I just love capturing sort of motorcycle lifestyle shots, like you say about TC and Thundercat. When I met him at DGR in 2018, so a couple of years ago, it was just, I hung out with him that day, and then we kept in touch, and then we met up like a few weeks later and went for the first ride together when I had my bobber, and we just took like a load of snaps, and it was just really cool to sort of like see that in the flesh. Like, I followed his profile, I could see the work that he'd done for different companies and that, and it was again, it just goes back to me saying about sometimes you feel like people are celebrities because you follow them on Instagram, but truthfully, we're all just people that just love bikes. We all have a passion, and once you get to know people, you just realize that there's just so many good people out there.
Yeah, and I think we're all the same, just trying to have a crack and get to know each other and kind of ride a few nice motorcycles in the process. I felt the same with the podcast. I put my first episode up yesterday, I think it was, and I can be a bit of a perfectionist, and obviously podcasting is a bit of a new medium for me. I've not really recorded my voice all that much, and I have a pretty thick Australian accent at times. So, the perfectionist in me wanted to re-record a bunch of stuff, and the other side of me was saying, no, just get it up and, just keep learning and moving that way. So, yeah, I totally get the, the learning as you go.
100%. Yeah, stick with it. I think podcasting is a really good idea.
We've got 2 minutes, Matt, and we will get kicked off because Tony and I went over last week, and they don't give you any warning. They just boot you off. They're pretty rude. Jackson said, where can we find the podcast? Just go to the neutral site. But Matt, it's been a pleasure, such a pleasure talking with you, and I'm really keen to grab a beer or a wine when I get to the UK. So thank you so much for jumping on tonight, or your midday, I should say, and telling us about your journey.
Yeah, no worries, man. Obviously, thank you ever so much for having me on. Like, it's a real pleasure. I think this is awesome. I look forward to seeing who comes on next.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Take care, dude. Bye.
Bye.